All right, good morning, good afternoon. Thank you for joining me today. Over the next 25 minutes or so, I'm going to run through this presentation for you, and I titled it Achieving the Best Possible Divorce for You and Your Family. And we're really going to explore this concept of your best possible divorce, what that means, how you figure out how to design your best possible divorce, and then how you make that a reality. So just briefly start here with an introduction. If you're unaware of me, if I've never met you, my name is James Traub. I'm a certified coach. I am a certified health and well-being coach. And I'm also a couple of weeks away from finishing up a program to become a certified divorce coach. I am collaboratively trained to participate within the collaborative divorce process. And one of the areas that I bring into my coaching that is a real passion point for me is nervous system regulation, because life is so full of stress, and divorce is one of the most stressful situations that you will ever go through. And so understanding what's happening inside of your body from a nervous system standpoint is really, really helpful, because when we are emotionally triggered, it's very difficult for us to think. It's very difficult for us to take in new information. It's very difficult for us to make good long-term decisions for ourselves. So, I've researched and dug into polyvagal theory with Stephen Porges. I've done Wim Hof breathing and ice baths as part of my own practice, and I've read many of the books by Peter Levine to better understand trauma and how that's stored in the body. For the last couple of years, I have also been a men's work facilitator. I participate in workshops. I have led my own men's retreats for several years now. I run a weekly men's book club, and I am actively within a men's circle that's here where I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I do bring a lot of that work into my coaching as well, and have a particular passion for working with men. And although I have not been through divorce, I am married right now with 2 kids. I am a child of divorce, and I've watched what has happened between my parents over the last 26 years. And unfortunately, they do not interact and they do not communicate with one another, which has a very real impact on me. It has an impact on their relationship with their grandkids. And it's something that I want to help other families to avoid, because a challenging divorce experience oftentimes makes having good relationships afterwards very, very difficult. And before all of this work with coaching, I got my degree in chemistry and spent 15 years leading quality assurance and quality control activities for herbal medicines and dietary supplement companies. So let's dig in here, and let's start by talking about who this presentation is for. So if you are in the pre-divorce stage, whether you are contemplating divorce, whether you've had conversations with your spouse about your desire to divorce and you've dropped the D word, or whether you are actively in the divorce process. And I would say if you are in kind of the first half of your divorce journey, then you're going to find this presentation to be very, very helpful. If you're concerned about the impact that divorce will have on your future and the future of your family, then this is going to be very relevant, because we're talking about the best possible divorce, which is really setting the stage for what you want to come next. If you're feeling overwhelmed, and whether that's by the process itself, by the cost of going through divorce, whether it's all of the change in your life, whether it's the sudden change in how your partner behaves towards you or talks to you, whether it's the conflict, there's a lot of things to feel overwhelmed by as you navigate this process. And what we're going to talk about today, this concept of the best possible divorce, is really about defining your North Star, so that as things feel like they might be falling apart or crumbling under your feet all around you, you at least know where you're going, and you're holding that vision front and center, and that's something for you to hold on to. And if you're having trouble envisioning your life after divorce, 5 years, 10 years after divorce, then this is for you too. I want to just acknowledge that it can be tremendously difficult to envision like a positive, joyful future for yourself when in this moment you're not even sure how you're going to survive or get through the next couple of months. But it is not impossible to get out there and to envision that future. And I personally believe that it is tremendously important that you do that work, because if you don't have a long-range view of what you want next, then it's very difficult to make decisions while you are in this process. And finally, if you're wanting to achieve the best possible outcome for you and your family, well, that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. And I'm going to use two models as we go through this presentation to help communicate all of this. The first is this simple spaghetti diagram, which is really just a representation of how you might get from point A to point B. So that's going to be our model for talking about the best possible divorce. And then really this two-step process of defining and aligning, because once you've figured out where you want to be and what you want your divorce, really, once you've figured out where you want to be afterwards, it's about aligning your divorce journey to get you to that point. So let me pose to you just this foundational question here of what does define the best possible divorce, right? Is it getting the house? Is it getting custody of the kids? Is it splitting things 50-50? Is it a divorce that doesn't cost more than a certain amount? Is it maintaining privacy, right? Is it enacting some sort of a toll and inflicting some pain on your partner for all of the pain that they've caused you? And I would argue that none of these is a good measure or a good definition of the best possible divorce. And at the risk of being overly simplistic, my view of the best possible divorce is simply any divorce that gets you from where you are today to where you want to be tomorrow. So this is what we're going to unpack here in some greater detail. And we're going to start by taking a look at what defines where you are today. And the first is your current circumstances. So where you are at in the divorce process matters. Again, if you are pre-divorce in the contemplation stage, maybe you're in the discussion stage, maybe you're actively preparing either to communicate to your spouse your desire, or maybe you've already kind of discussed it and now you're preparing to separate. And that's very different than if you're actively in the divorce stage. If you have already separated, maybe you've selected an attorney, maybe you haven't. Maybe you've chosen what divorce process that you want to use that feels like the best fit, whether that's collaborative divorce, whether that's mediation, whether that's being self-represented, or whether that's going to court, right, in the litigation process. And whether you've assembled a divorce team of other professionals or not, all of these start to define your current circumstances and speak to what might need to happen next and what that next thing should be. Other things that define your current circumstances are if and how you notified your partner. This is a big step, and how you do it matters. How you notify your partner can set things on a track towards being amicable and keeping lines of communication open, or it can really kind of shut things down and create a lot of conflict right there at the beginning of the process. Same thing, if and how you notified your kids is going to have a big impact on what their experience is as this divorce, starts to unfold. Other things that impact your circumstances, any sort of safety concerns, right? And whether this is abusive behavior, verbal abuse, physical abuse, or financial abuse, those things are going to impact you and impact what comes next. If you are having to deal in the background with any sort of addiction issues, or if there's been an affair, or if, like I was just saying, if there's been any abuse, all of these things are going to speak to your divorce journey, what it's going to be like, and what might need to be included. If you're dealing with mental health issues or personality disorders, whether that's your own, whether that's with your spouse, or whether that's with one of your children, then that's important to know and to accommodate. And finally, a big one is your current ability to communicate with your spouse, because if you can talk about custody, if you can talk about parenting, if you can talk about money with your spouse right now without things blowing up, then that opens up some doors for how you might navigate through this divorce. Whereas if every time you sit down to talk about this stuff, one person shuts down or it turns into an argument, then that's going to get you pointed in a very different direction. So we've got your circumstances, but then we've also got your interests in terms of defining where you are. Whether that's around child custody, whether that's around the future of co-parenting, splitting your assets, your living situation and what happens to the house during the separation phase and after the separation phase, what happens with your friend and family relationships, how you manage your finances right now until the divorce is finalized, what you do with your family debt, how you're going to manage insurance, if you jointly own some sort of a family business, and retirement and privacy and the cost of divorce and your children and your pets, right? All of these things could be interests for you. And for each individual, if you were to take some time and kind of rank order these things, they're going to be either more or less important than the other things that are on the list. And as you do this, it starts to define your own personal circumstances that are different from someone else's. And I think it's important to call out too that some of these interests are complementary, right, and align well with one another. And some of them are actually in opposition to one another. So getting a super clear picture on your financial future and maybe looking at the finances around the house might involve using another divorce professional, but that might also increase the cost of divorce. So if you want the greatest amount of planning, but you also want the lowest cost, those things might run in conflict with one another and should be addressed. So your circumstances and your interests are really the drivers of where you are today. Let's take a look at what plays into where you want to be tomorrow. And I like to start by getting focused on the future, looking ahead, and asking yourself this question of what do you want your life to look and feel like, whether that's 3 or 5 or 10 years from now. What do you envision for your relationship with your ex-spouse? What do you want that to look and feel like in the future? What do you envision for your relationship with your children? What do you envision for your relationships with friends and family and in-laws? What do you envision? What do you want it to look and feel like when your children's birthdays come up, when there's a holiday, when there are special occasions, when the grandchildren are born, right? What do you want things to look and feel like, both for yourself, but maybe also try to think about it through the lens of your children? What do you want it to look and feel like for them? When you think about your money, right, your own personal financial situation or where you're at in terms of work or returning to work or advancing in your career, what do you envision? What do you envision for your ability to co-parent with this individual and to communicate? What do you envision in terms of romance in your own life? Whether that is dating again, whether that's finding a partner, whether it's getting married again, but bringing some amount of romance in your life. What do you want things to look like some years from now? What do you want your physical and mental well-being to be like? And what do you envision for fun and recreation and the ways that you're able to use your time to do things that fill you up? Physically, emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. And as important as it is to actually take some time and invest that time in answering these questions and really thinking about where it is that you're wanting to go in your life, it's also very important to look at the flip side and say, what do you not want? Like, what do you want to avoid in your future relationship with your ex-spouse? What do you want to avoid in terms of your relationship with your children? What do you want to avoid in terms of how birthdays and special occasions and holidays feel in the future? Taking the time to answer these questions is going to be tremendously helpful in terms of thinking about your divorce journey and what that needs to look like to get you to where you want to go. So after you look forward, we're going to flip it around and I'm going to ask you to look back. So when you look back on this divorce and just like pick any number in time, but let's just say 5 years from now, what do you want to see? What do you want to be able to say about how you showed up during this divorce? You probably don't want to say, man, I was nasty. I was not my best self, right? I was angry, I was hurt, and I did some things that I'm not proud of. And if that's not what you want to see when you look back, then try to answer this question. What do you want to be able to say about how you showed up? What do you want your children to say about how you showed up? What do you want your friends and family who are impacted by this and who are standing on the sidelines to say about how they saw you show up? What positive story do you want to be able to tell about how you navigated this difficult transition? These are really, really important questions, because without thinking about these, it's really easy to let the pain and the hurt and the fear that is inevitable during a divorce journey to shape how you're showing up, and to look back on that later and to not feel so great about that. So we've taken a look at the 2 factors that help to define where you are today, and we just took a look at the 2 factors that help to define where you want to be tomorrow. And in between where you are and where you want to be lies your divorce journey. So let's take a moment to explore that a little bit deeper too. And I really like using this iceberg analogy, where we've got the tip of the iceberg that's sticking out. This is the visible part that we see, but then under the water is this oftentimes even larger invisible part to the iceberg. And on the top are kind of the most visible aspects of a divorce, right? Which is the division of all of your property, your assets, and your liabilities. There's what happens with alimony, sometimes also called spousal support. And if you have children, there's what happens with child custody, child support, and having a parenting plan for what holidays and time your kid spends with each parent and how you manage that. And these 5 aspects of a divorce really get a lot of focus. It's where a lot of the conversation goes. And if you engage with a legal professional like an attorney, this is what much of the conversation is about. And yet under the water are many other things that you are undoubtedly dealing with as you go through this journey. There's any sort of interpersonal conflict that you have with your spouse, with your children, with your in-laws, with your family. There's a tremendous amount of intense feelings such as anger or fear or sadness or confusion or disgust. And those emotions can be overwhelming and really kind of grind your ability to navigate life to a halt. There's the impact on your children that you're aware of and that you're trying to mitigate. There's the impact on your friends and family relationships. There's the impact on you and how that plays out at work and your ability to feel secure at work and to continue to earn an income for yourself. There's the financial stress of seeing things cut in half and not knowing what sort of money you're going to have for yourself, for living, for retirement in the future. And there might be financial insecurity too, if you've never really been on top of your family's finances and you haven't been doing the budgeting and you haven't been doing paying of the bills and you haven't been managing investments, right? You may not even have access to all of those accounts right now, and that may bring some feelings of insecurity. Again, there could be issues of addiction and abuse. There could have been an affair that you might be dealing with. There could be any sort of violence or safety concerns for you and your children as you go through this separation, the mental and physical health issues that we mentioned, the personality disorders. Sometimes a child or the spouse is dealing with disability. Maybe you're getting displaced, or it feels like you're getting displaced from where you're used to living as a result of this separation. There's almost always an impact on your ability to sleep well, which feeds into your energy, and low energy and poor sleep oftentimes translate into mood problems, which can lead to drinking and the use of drugs and other unhealthy coping mechanisms, right? And then there's all the people that have an opinion about what's happening and why it happened and what you should do next. And, I know this is a long list, right? And it can be overwhelming just to look at this list, but we can't ignore everything that's going on under the surface of the water here, because to you, this may be as much, if not more important and more difficult to navigate than the things that are above the water. And all of this lines up pretty nicely with what are called the 4 dimensions of divorce, right? And the 2 that get the most airtime are the 2 that we see above the water, which are the legal and the financial aspects of divorce. Those have to be navigated, right? That is what the attorney is basically walking you through, is the legal and the financial separation. But so much of what you are dealing with that ends up dictating how you're making decisions and how you're feeling and how you're behaving during this process, which dictates kind of what your relationships are going to be like in the future, are all of these social and emotional dynamics that oftentimes the people who aren't that close to you just don't see. And oftentimes people will go through a divorce journey without adequate support for the social and the emotional aspects. And that's a part of the reason that the divorce is so challenging and just feels so grueling. So at this point, we have a pretty complete roadmap of this divorce, from where you are to where you want to be, and this divorce journey in between, and the factors that help to define those 3 things. So now the big and logical question is how? Like, how do you achieve the best possible divorce once you've defined these things? And really there's 2 steps. And step 1 is to define it, and that's what we just did, right? These are the puzzle pieces of taking stock of where you are, where you want to be, and understanding all of the key factors in your own personal, unique family divorce journey. And the second step is simply to align it. And by align it, I mean paying attention to your decisions and your behaviors and the type of support that you are engaging with to have the best possible divorce. So we're going to unpack these three things here over the next couple of slides. So when we think about important decisions that would help to align your divorce journey with where you want to go, it starts with your choice of an attorney, because different attorneys have a different preferred process or a process that they are kind of known for. And whether you choose an attorney that traditionally goes to court, or whether it's an attorney that tries to reach out-of-court settlements, or whether you choose to go with a collaborative attorney or no attorney, right? And to just do mediation, all of that is going to strongly impact your divorce journey. And it may or may not be aligned with what your interests and what your needs are. So that also plays into your choice of the divorce process. Some processes help to limit conflict, and they will leave you in the driver's seat. They will leave you with more control over the outcome in your separation agreement. Other divorce processes are going to kind of take away some of your control and give it to someone else, whether it's a judge or whether it's an attorney. And some divorce processes inherently create some additional tension and conflict and may not serve the best interests of your children, right? So these are very, very important decisions that you want to make already with this vision of what you want your life to be like post-divorce. And we revisited this earlier, but how you tell your partner and how you tell your children is also a very important decision. And if we can talk about what your options are and how you might go about doing that before you actually do it, then in doing those communications, you're actually creating the type of divorce experience for yourself and your family that you're most wanting to have. How you prepare before telling your spouse is also very important in terms of getting information. Maybe it's collecting information. Maybe it's collecting some documents. Maybe it's just getting really, really clear on what's important to you so that you can come from a more like informed and grounded place in having these conversations rather than a more kind of reactive, fear-based place. And another one is who you listen to or take advice from, because your friends and your family are all going to have an opinion. And they may not really understand your present circumstances. They may not really understand where you want to go and what you want things to be like post-divorce. And if they don't understand those things, then the advice that they give you, even though it may be well-intentioned, even though it may be grounded in their own personal experience, may not be the most appropriate for you, given where you are and where you want to go. We also need to take a look at important behaviors. So how well you can communicate with your ex-spouse matters. How you behave around your children matters. How well you understand your children's needs as you go through this divorce process matters. Because if you're not paying attention to that, then their needs are likely to be unmet or not considered as you make major decisions that impact them. How well you handle conflict and any sort of hot button or sensitive issues with your spouse really matters. Because if you cannot manage conflict and you get set off all the time, or your spouse does, then it's going to take certain types of divorce off the table. You may not be able to mediate. You may not be able to do collaborative law. You may end up needing to pursue a divorce process where you have less control and less privacy and potentially a lot more cost. How organized and credible you are in terms of interacting with your attorney, or if you do need to go to court, how credible you are in court really, really matters. People who are credible are people who are listened to and considered. How well you can communicate with your attorney and the other professionals matters, because this in very large ways is going to dictate the cost, right, in your legal fees, but it's also going to impact your attorney's ability to represent you and to represent your interests and what you decided was most important to you. How well you take care of yourself, right? Self-care during this whole process, taking care of yourself physically and emotionally, getting the support that you really need so that stress doesn't take over your life. And finally, how will you establish healthy boundaries with friends and family? Because People are going to want to know how things are going, right? And people are all going to have an opinion, and that can be very, very taxing. And especially if you're getting conflicting information from different people in your life, it can just create a lot of additional stress on you. So these are all different behaviors that are going to have a really big impact on your experience and how your divorce journey unfolds. And the third part is the important support that you need, right? And so we've talked about this a couple of different ways, but you've got choices between working with no attorney, right? Just doing mediation or self-representation. There's a couple of different options for working with attorneys, whether it's going to court, whether it's out-of-court settlements, whether it's having them review your mediation kind of agreement, the outcome of or the output of that process, or whether it's working with a fully fledged divorce team. And there are professionals in all of these different areas who have the training and have the expertise to help you to navigate whatever it is that you need to navigate and to help you to get to the endpoint that you want to get to. So there's attorneys, there's attorney mediators and non-attorney mediators that you can work with to help figure out kind of the legal aspects of your separation agreement. There's a lot of different financial professionals that can help, whether it's a certified divorce financial analyst or a certified financial planner that can help you to look at budgeting in the future, once your assets have shifted, or to really take a more long-term view of what an equitable distribution might look like, not just in the short term, but in the long term. If you think that there's money that's being hidden and your spouse is not being honest and transparent about what your assets are, you can hire a forensic accountant, which can go and they can do some digging and they can go and find those accounts and find the money. If you own a business or have to sell a business with your spouse, you might need a business valuation specialist who can figure out what the value of that business is and what you're going to do with that business, whether that's selling it or whether it's getting bought out. And then finally, as it relates to property in your home, there's a certified divorce real estate expert and certified divorce lending professionals who all really understand what it is that people are going through during divorce and have an eye towards structuring things to be as beneficial for you as possible. From the emotional standpoint, there's therapists, obviously, but there's also divorce coaches that can really help you to navigate and manage and to express and to work with all of the emotions that come up as you go through this big change. And then as it gets into parenting and co-parenting, right? There's co-parenting specialists that can help to improve decision-making and communication between parents when things are really strained. There's child psychologists that can meet with your children to understand how they're feeling, how they're doing, what they're needing, what they're wanting, and represent that to you. You can work with the child school counselor, and again, a divorce coach can do a lot of skills building around communication and co-parenting. And you might be looking at this list going, holy crap, I already knew divorce was going to be expensive. How can I possibly engage other professionals, right? Like, isn't this just going to be so expensive? And one of the big challenges, not one of the big challenges, but one of the big mistakes that many people make going through a divorce is that they treat their attorney as a one-stop shop. And they expect them to be able to do so many things outside of offering just excellent legal support and guidance. And your attorney in almost every case is the most expensive professional on this list. And so using other professionals, if it means that you don't have to go to your attorney for that particular consultation, will actually save you money every single time you do that. And just to look at some examples here, right? Instead of paying an attorney $400 an hour to help you to process your emotional reactions, you could spend $150 an hour with a therapist, right? Instead of working with your attorney to take a look at your budget, you could spend $200 an hour working with a financial advisor. Or you could spend a lot less with a divorce coach to practice having difficult conversations, whether this is talking about your desire to divorce or the difficult conversations around negotiating custody or the division of assets. Or if it's really about coordinating between professionals, like you don't have the time or you don't have the energy to figure out who you need to work with, let alone what individual that you want to work with. Again, a divorce coach can help to air traffic control. They've got a network, they can connect you to different professionals, and they can make some recommendations so it makes the whole process easier for you. And I bring all of this up because not getting the right support is going to make it very difficult for you to navigate your divorce journey and get to where you want to get to. And right now, looking forward, a lot of this is going to look like a cost. But 5, 10 years from now, as you look back on your divorce and what a huge impact that had on your life post-divorce, it's really going to look more like an investment in the outcome that you most want. So that really completes this whole roadmap here of designing and achieving your best possible divorce. And we've talked about all of the elements on the screen here, and I hope you can see now that, the design it portion is getting clear on where you are, where you want to be, and all of the unique things that you're having to deal with as part of your divorce journey. And then step 2, the aligning it, is really bringing your decisions, your behaviors, and your support down to match with what the needs are of where you are and where you want to go. So let's just recap with some important takeaways before we end this presentation here. The first recap is that achieving the best possible divorce is not dependent on how much money you have to spend on your divorce. Right? It's really about getting clear on where you want to go and what you need to get there. And we just took a look at how working with a larger divorce team can actually be more affordable than just working with an attorney, which can be a little bit surprising. Number 2, achieving the best possible divorce is not dependent on the absence of difficult personal circumstances. So you shouldn't say, well, my spouse is high conflict, or my spouse is addicted to alcohol or to drugs, and therefore this divorce is going to be a real crapshoot, right? There are so many professionals out there that can provide the type of support that you need, whether it's for you, whether it's for the process, whether it's for your children, the skills building to help you to deal with these difficult situations. Those are not insurmountable obstacles to getting to where you want to get to. It's really a question of understanding what you need to best be able to navigate those circumstances. Number 3, it's not necessarily more expensive to work with a divorce team than it is to just work with an attorney. And again, this might seem backwards, but it is absolutely true. And I didn't even talk about how working with someone like a divorce coach can help you to get more organized and to understand how to work best with an attorney so that you can make the best use of the money that you do spend, right? If you can consolidate into one meeting what you might normally do over 2 meetings and save yourself a bunch of follow-up phone calls, the cost savings are going to roll up pretty quickly. And finally, number 4, to just remember that achieving the best possible divorce requires that you align your decisions, your behaviors, and your support with the needs of your own unique divorce journey and your vision for the future. So I've got some free worksheets to help you to define your best possible divorce. And as we took a look at the 2 steps of defining and aligning, these worksheets start to walk you through this process of defining where you are and creating that vision of where you want to be. It's the same things that you saw on the slide, but it provides you an opportunity to actually answer these questions and put pen to paper and to start this thought experiment of what defines my circumstances, what defines my interests, and what do I want to see when I'm looking forward and when I'm looking back. And it also includes a roadmap of the best possible divorce that we took a look at today. So if you want a copy of those, I'll give you my email address here at the end of this presentation. Just feel free to shoot me an email and say you want the worksheets from the presentation. And another asset that is on my website is this divorce guide that I created. It's called Your First 30 Days, a roadmap to clarity, confidence, and informed decision-making. So if you are pre-divorce or at the very initial stages of starting your divorce journey, I highly recommend checking this out. It's 15 pages, and it's going to help you to think about your kids. It's going to help you to think about what they need. It's going to help you to organize your thoughts and really kind of take the high road as it applies to your divorce by thinking about what the stumbling blocks are going to be, and again, what sort of support you might need. But this guide, far beyond the presentation today, is going to give you a lot of interesting things to think about and consider so that you can get as clear as possible on what's going to be a roadblock and what your goals are. And it's going to help you to avoid some of the mistakes that oftentimes cost a boatload of money. So just remember that the first 30 days of your divorce journey sets the tone for everything that follows. And I don't mean just in the divorce, but I mean like everything, right? The rest of your life. Really, really important things are happening in this time period. So if you want a copy of this, you can go to bestpossibledivorce.com and get access to it there. And finally, thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. I hope that you found some value in this presentation today. I am more than willing to answer any questions that you might have. So you can find my website, my email, my phone number here. Please reach out. Let me know what you think. Let me know what your questions are. And just remember in closing this quote from Napoleon Hill, where he says that every adversity, every defeat, and every heartbreak carry with it the seed of an equivalent advantage. And what he's trying to say here is that when things turn sour, there is always something to be gained. But I want to remind you that that is not a given, right? Oftentimes we need to surround ourselves with the right type of people to make the most out of our challenging circumstances. So with that, thank you again, and please feel free to reach out. My name is James Traub, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.